Good afternoon from the cloudy and rainy Copenhagen. Thank you for joining us today for the webinar Options for Incentivizing Voluntary Above-Code Construction, hosted by Copenhagen Center on Energy Efficiency in collaboration with World Resources Institute and various partners. This webinar is organized under the umbrella of the Building Efficiency Accelerator. My name is Aris, and I work for the Copenhagen Center on Energy Efficiency. A couple of things before we jump into our very interesting webinar today. This webinar is going to be about 60 minutes long, and then we'll have some time for Q&A at the end. One of the questions we get every single webinar, even when I make this announcement, is this webinar recorded? And the answer is yes, we're recording. More information on how to access the recorded webinars will be presented in a few minutes. Finally, we are pleased to announce that more than 160 people have registered for this webinar, so welcome everybody. A few things about the Copenhagen Center. The center conducts research and advisory activities in the field of energy efficiency and serves as energy efficiency hub for the Sustainable Energy for All initiative. The center has an established network of global, regional, and national partners with a broad range of stakeholders to help accelerate the implementation of energy efficiency activities. We also support building efficiency accelerators with hosting different webinars from various partners. I would like to briefly introduce the speaker of today's webinar. Grant is in US Green Building Council, and he is an international policy specialist. Michael is a green project administrator for the city of Chicago. Joan is a green building manager with Arlington County of Virginia. Gerrit-Jan is a consultant in energy and sustainability at TRAJECT. Ulises is the CEO of Bioconstruccion Energia Alternativa. And finally, Linda is the Vice President of Initiatives for Civic Action. On a regular basis, the Building Efficiency Accelerator is conducting webinars. All materials, including recordings and presentations from previous webinars, can be found on Copenhagen Center's Knowledge Management System. In the e-learning section, we have a shortcut for the Building Efficiency Accelerator webinar collection. The material of today's webinar will be uploaded shortly. Finally, I would like to inform that you can send us your questions, and we will do our best to answer as many as we can at the end of the presentation. Please do not forget to mention the name of the panelist that the question is for. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Grant. Grant, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Aris. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone online. Thank you for taking time out of your day to view this webinar. In the interest of time, I'm going to make a few brief remarks about the U.S. Green Building Council and the Building Efficiency Accelerator before turning it over to the panelists to discuss examples of policies and some programs. The U.S. Green Building Council is a nonprofit NGO committed to transforming the way our buildings and cities are designed, constructed, and operated through LEED, the top third-party verification system for sustainable structures around the world, with projects certified in more than 164 countries and with 2.2 square feet of building space being certified every day. As Aris mentioned, my name is Grant Olear. I'm an international policy specialist. My email is listed there. Should any of the attendees need to contact me about anything regarding this webinar, please feel free. I've been with the organization since 2014, Several of my colleagues work on the BEA with me. However, I run point, so if you have any questions about USGBC's involvement in the BEA, also please feel free to email me. This webinar is being presented under the Building Efficiency Accelerator, as Aris mentioned. That is a public-private collaboration which turns global expertise into action to accelerate local government implementation of building efficiency policies. USGBC is a member of the Above Code/Voluntary Program Working Group, along with World GBC, who leads the working group. Other partners, such as the International Finance Corporation and Johnson Controls, are also involved. Today we will be discussing policies or programs that can be implemented in a jurisdiction to spur above-code construction throughout the private sector. There are two common types of incentives, and incentivizing things is one of the most effective and popular strategies to encourage above-code construction in the market. On this slide, you can see the description of financial and structural incentives and how they both work. I'm realizing now that I left other types of incentives out. You'll hear from Ulises about marketing assistance later, but some jurisdictions also offer technical assistance to help project teams with planning if they are unfamiliar with above-code construction. So our speakers today, as Aris put up on the slide, we have Michael Berkshire with the City of Chicago, Joan Kelsch with Arlington County, Gerrit-Jan Teunissen with TRAJECT, and Ulises Treviño with Bioconstruccion y Energia Alternativa, and Linda Weichel with Civic Action. And with that, I will pass it off to Michael.
Okay, can everyone see that?
Yes, this is good, Michael. We can see it.
Okay, great. Good day, everyone, and greetings from Chicago. I'm going to take a few minutes this morning to introduce a policy that we've had in place in the City of Chicago since actually 2004, so it's been around for almost 13 years. But we spent the last year updating the policy. So I'd like to talk a little bit about the previous policy and what has happened with that, as well as introduce the new policy. So as I said, this policy has been around since 2004. The previous policy was very prescriptive, and we were asking projects that are receiving public funding, so TIF dollars, tax increment financing, if they're buying property from the city at a reduced price, or if they're getting some form of tax credit, we were asking those projects to add sustainable elements. And it also included projects that needed special zoning approvals, such as planned developments, which are large-scale developments. So all of those, we were typically asking for them to achieve some form of building certification. We were recognizing LEED, Energy Star, and Green Globes, and also we asked that they included a green roof component. So depending on the type of project, it was either 100% or 50% of the roof we were asking to be covered in vegetation. And then we did make a few updates along the way and added some additional alternatives, including exceeding some of our stormwater ordinance performance requirements. In terms of the performance of this policy, we did conduct some analysis a few years ago. Back in 2013, we actually bought some satellite imagery to find out how many green roofs we had. And as of that date, or the fall of 2013, we had over 500 green roofs totaling almost 5.6 million square feet. So we're definitely leading in North America, and we're probably in the top 5 globally in terms of the amount of green roofs. And as a part of that analysis, we also had our consultant look at, of those 500 green roofs, how many were actually developed or constructed due to the policy. And they estimated that over 80% of the roofs that we have, green roofs that we have in Chicago, were due to the policy. And in terms of LEED certification, we've also been, the state of Illinois has had the most amount of LEED certified space for the last 3 years. So we feel that there's a similar percentage of those projects that also were spurred on by the policy. So that's the previous policy. So in terms of what has happened since 2004, the environmental context here in Chicago has changed quite a bit. Back in 2004, we really didn't have a comprehensive sustainability plan or set of goals. So since then, we have the Climate Action Plan that was established back in 2008. those established very aggressive greenhouse gas emission reduction levels. We have also had a series of sustainable action agendas. Our latest one is Sustainable Chicago 2015 that we'll be updating this year. And we also have some other policies and programs, including Retrofit Chicago, where we're asking buildings to voluntarily reduce the amount of energy that they're using. We have the energy benchmarking ordinance, where we're requiring buildings over a certain square footage to actually publish the amount of energy they use each year, and a couple of other programs and policies that have come into play since 2004. So the objectives for updating the policy this last year were to reflect these changes in the market, not only in you know, kind of our sustainable context in Chicago, but also the amount of expertise that has been gained in green building in terms of design, construction management, etc. And also just there's a lot more demand for sustainable elements and sustainable buildings in Chicago. So we wanted to reflect those changes. And we wanted to try to incorporate a broader environmental context going beyond just green building and green roofs. And we wanted to kind of change the rhetoric of this. Instead of saying, you know, we require this, we wanted to really recognize innovation. We realized that there were buildings out there that were including some really amazing and interesting sustainable strategies and elements that we wanted to be able to recognize. And of course, it adds flexibility in meeting our sustainability goals. And then the last objective was that, you know, before we felt that we were creating environmental and value, but we also wanted to add some social and economic value to the policies that we were impacting. We spent all last year updating this. We assembled a committee, and they had expertise from a wide variety of sustainable areas, stormwater management, sustainable landscapes, energy efficiency. We had a few developers on the committee. We met as a group, and then we divided into smaller groups. And then I went on a road show for a couple of months and received further feedback from a lot of the stakeholders, developers, architects, contracting membership organizations, as well as the attorneys that were working on these projects. So in the end, this new policy became effective in January of this year. Now you're looking at the screen that has the spreadsheet that organizes the policy. And again, those are the menu items across the columns. You can see that each of those menu items has a number of points attached to it. And again, we're asking new construction projects to achieve 100 points. And renovation, depending on how in-depth the renovation is, either 25 points or 50 points. And there are two compliance paths. One path is that you can choose to achieve all 100 points and not receive any form of building certification. So you just have to achieve all 100, choosing from those various strategies. Or the other compliance path is if you do achieve a certain level of building certification from any of those certification programs that are listed. So we're recognizing LEED, Green Globes, Living Building Challenge, Enterprise Green Communities, and Passive House. You are automatically, if you are achieving any of those types of certifications at different levels, you automatically achieve so many points up front. So for instance, if you're achieving LEED Gold, you're already achieving 90 points. So you just have to choose from the rest of the items an additional 10 points. And you can see in some of the cells there that there's NA, or not applicable. That means that if you are achieving that level of LEED, for instance, LEED Gold, there are some of those strategies that you will have already achieved by achieving that level. So we didn't want developers, we didn't want to give them the ability to double dip, so to speak. So you do have to, you have to choose from those strategies that are remaining. And you can see that the strategies are categorized by you know, the type of sustainability that they're achieving. And what we're really doing here is we're asking developers to go beyond the existing codes in Chicago as well as policy. So we had a group of energy strategies. So for instance, strategy 2.2, we're asking them to exceed the current energy code, which is the International Energy Code 2015. If they exceed those levels or the performance levels required by that existing code by 5%, they automatically get 20 points. The next set is associated with stormwater. We have a stormwater ordinance that's performance driven. So if you exceed those levels of performance that we're asking for in the ordinance, you'll also achieve points. So that's it in a nutshell. I look forward to your questions at the end. Thank you. And I'm going to turn it over to Joan Kelsch from Arlington County.
Greetings, everyone. Grant, let me know if my slides don't change accordingly. We'll see what we can do to fix that. Thank you very much for having me today. It's a pleasure to be here with all of these folks. My name is Joan Kelsch, and I run the green building programs in Arlington County, Virginia. I'm going to tell you a little bit about our green building incentive program. It's designed for private developers to encourage green development in the county. We use our zoning ordinance as kind of the base of our program to encourage above code construction. We use LEED, the LEED Green Building Rating System, as our baseline measure for what is green. And we also focus heavily on, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. There we go. Focus heavily on energy efficiency. So quick introduction to Arlington. We're a relatively small jurisdiction right across the Potomac River from Washington, D.C. We're 26 square miles, but very densely populated, about 8,500 people per square mile. Arlington, the Washington, D.C. area about 50 years ago built a subway system, and Arlington took that and did some very careful planning associated with that. You can see this is our general land use plan. This is the shape of Arlington. Through the center, going horizontally, there's one metro corridor, that darker section, and there's another one that goes vertically on the east side of the county. And what the general land use plan shows is we're encouraging denser, higher development along that metro corridor, and then that preserves the lighter green or yellow areas for our lesser developed suburban type neighborhoods, kind of leafy communities with parks and whatnot. The zoning ordinance is a very effective planning tool that applies to the whole county, and it allows us to target dense development near transit, allowing for lots of some good transit-oriented development. Arlington has a very unique character in that the metro corridors are very walkable, lots of biking and various transit options, but those lighter areas are quite nice, more open, lesser developed neighborhoods. To give you a sense of what this looks like in real life, this is an aerial shot of Arlington looking east towards Washington, D.C. You can see at the very top there's a little white line. That's the Washington Monument. We've experienced lots of growth in the last 20 or 30 years. This is the Roslyn-Ballston Metro Corridor. Each M on here is a metro stop, a different subway stop. And we have focused our development very carefully around that corridor. So you can see the black lines kind of designate the dense development along the corridor and the lower density zoning on the outskirts. One interesting note is that this kind of transit-oriented development has really curbed traffic in the county. We have almost twice the population we had in 1970, but our traffic has stayed about the same. So we really, really encourage people quite successfully to use transit in the county. So as a result of all of that dense construction in those metro corridors, there are environmental consequences, and we became very aware of that back in the late 90s when this development started taking off. And we've tried to develop, our green building program was designed to mitigate some of those environmental impacts. So all of you who live in cities know stormwater is a big issue, air quality, increase in heat islands impacts energy efficiency and basic comfort. Reduced open space and habitat is a big problem when you have big dense development. And we're creating a lot of indoor space, a lot of indoor environment. And we, as humans, spend 90% of our time indoors. So creating indoor environments that are healthy and make people want to be there is really important as well. So the Green Building Program is designed to mitigate some of those impacts, and the LEED Green Building Rating System has been very helpful in designing that. So our program allows developers to build slightly bigger buildings if they meet the LEED Silver standard or higher and very specific energy requirements. So that has two benefits. One, the developers like it because they get to build a slightly larger building with more leasable space, so it's a very powerful financial incentive for them. The community gets greener buildings with lower environmental impact that would come from regular standard code-built development. So these buildings use less energy, they use less water, there's less impact on the wastewater treatment system, on the stormwater management system, all of those sorts of things that cost a community money. These green buildings help mitigate some of that. The other intent was to push the market, the construction market in the DC area towards greener technologies. And over the last 20 years, that has definitely happened. The entire Washington, D.C. region has a lot of green construction. It's kind of almost the baseline of how people build in the region currently. So give you a brief history of our program. I won't go through all of these updates, but we launched the program back around 2000. It's not required, this is a voluntary program. Nobody has to do this. They can opt in if they choose. We offered office buildings the opportunity to build the LEED Silver for a little extra bonus. That became, we needed to update that fairly quickly because the market changed. People became more accustomed to building green, so it wasn't like we were incentivizing them. They were actually doing it anyway. Building code improves every couple years, every 3 years about. So there are more stringent energy codes, and we needed to increase our program so that we kept just one step ahead of the energy codes. We don't want to incentivize people for building a code building. They need to build something a little bit beyond that. And most recently, in 2014, we updated our code to focus heavily on energy performance. There have been a lot of issues about energy design, and then when you put people in the building and they turn on the lights and plug in their computers, the buildings actually use more energy than they were designed to use. So we're very interested in what the actual performance of the building is. And finally, we give a little bit of extra credit if you achieve some of these Arlington priority credits. So issues that are particularly important in Arlington, those include energy efficiency, really tight building envelopes, making sure that there's open space and habitat in that dense urban corridor, installing on-site renewable energy. And we really encourage folks to reuse buildings, not tear down and build new whenever possible, but to keep that embodied energy in the existing building. And we'll give you a little extra credit if you do that as well. So our program is, in concept, fairly simple. In implementation, it's a little bit more technical. So this is kind of the simple overarching view of our program. If a building decides that they would like a little extra density, which most of them do, they can choose to build to the LEED Silver standard using LEED version 4 or higher, and they have to do a couple other things. We want to see 10 years of energy reporting, so we want to know how much energy that building is using. And for office buildings, we require them, if they participate in the program, to get the Energy Star label within 4 years. So they've got some time to kind of have the building shake down and get there, but we really want them to get that certification. So that's a requirement of the program. Also, for residential buildings, we ask that they put in Energy Star appliances and WaterSense fixtures so that we ensure that all of those appliances and fixtures use less energy and less water through the life of the building. That is another requirement. And then, as I mentioned before, if they want a tiny bit of extra density, they can achieve a couple of Arlington priority credits or strive for the net zero energy certification. We have yet to see anybody do that, but we would love to give somebody some extra incentive if they chose to do that. So that's the conceptual overview. This slide is the tabular technical explanation of what we do. So I'll go through this quickly. I'm going to describe what that FAR, what that unit is, in the next slide. So bear with me, we'll get through this and then I'll explain exactly what that means. In the table, the lead levels are on the left, silver, gold, and platinum. If you're looking for lead silver, you can get 0.25 FAR. That's an additional density in your project. Gold and platinum, the FAR, the density increases. We'll give you a little bit extra if you do 2 Arlington priority credits. You get 0.05 FAR. It's not very much, but in many cases it's been enough to encourage people to do that. And then the totals are on the side. Floor area ratio is a planning term. Many of you may be aware of what that is, but I'll explain it quickly with this slide. It allows us to calculate the additional density in a building based on the site area. So 0.25 does not mean you get a 25% bigger building. It means you get a certain amount of square feet added to your building based on the site area. So in this little example, I've noted a site area, a site that's 40,000 square feet in size. If the project agrees to achieve LEED Silver, they can get 0.25 FAR additional space. So in this case, 0.25 FAR is 25% of this area of the site, which would be 10,000 square feet. So they would add 10,000 square feet to their building, which is probably 10 apartment units, maybe 12 apartment units, or a portion of a floor of an office building. It's enough to encourage the developers to do it, but not so much that the building becomes huge and the community starts to complain that there's too much density in the neighborhood. Just to show you the trend of our program, so in this graph from 2000 on, this shows all the green buildings that have been approved in Arlington. So these are not all built yet. About half are built and half are either under construction or awaiting permits and whatever. But you can see the gray lines are non-LEED buildings and the green lines are LEED certified buildings. So the trend over time has been towards more and more LEED buildings. And now just about every site plan project that comes in the county participates in our program and achieves LEED certification at the silver or gold. We haven't seen too many platinums, but at some LEED level, which is great. You can see the recession there at 2009 to 2010, so it's a good indication of kind of economic development in the county as well. What ends up happening in our program is these buildings that achieve LEED certification and these extra energy points are on average about 7% bigger than the building would be if it built to code and to our zoning ordinance limitations. So like I said before, that means there's about 10 or 12 extra apartment units in the building, or there's a portion of a floor. So it's not noticeably that big. But the buildings use 10 to 20% less energy and 30 to 40% less water than a building built to the standard building code. So a slightly bigger building has a significantly smaller environmental footprint. And that makes everybody happy. The developers have more space to lease, and the community's environment is protected a little bit. We do have to enforce this program, so we ask, this is another one of the technical complications of the program, but we ask the developers, if they participate, they have to post a bond. It's usually a few to several $100,000 to guarantee that they will achieve their LEED certification. We've never had anyone fail, so we've never collected on the bond. But it is some paperwork that has to be done to make sure that there is an enforcement. We need a hammer for this program, and that is the enforcement mechanism. And the other thing to note is that we do have to update our program periodically. You saw that history. So every 3 or 4 years, we need to keep ahead of the game. The market transforms, LEED gets upgraded, the building code gets upgraded, and we need to make sure we stay one step ahead of that. So we're in line in the next year or two for another update. Probably with a focus on energy again. That seems to be the way things are moving at the moment. So that is my presentation. I will pass it off to Gerrit-Jan from the Netherlands.
Thank you, Joan. I just want to make sure if everyone sees my screen now. Is it there?
We do, thank you.
Okay. Well, hello everyone. It's a pleasure for me to join this meeting as well. As this slide says the latest version of LEED is recognized by the Dutch policy. This is the result of my effort to have the Dutch Ministry of Economic Affairs to accept LEED building certification as an eligible measure to earn tax benefits. So this presentation is about the most applied incentive programs to stimulate energy efficiency and reduction of environmental impact. My name is Gerrit-Jan Teunissen, consultant at TRAJECT Consultants and Managers. I'm the first LEED AP in the Netherlands and also the first WELL AP in the Netherlands. I was awarded the USGBC's 2010 Astounding Advocate Award because of what I did to promote LEED in the Netherlands. And I'm very pleased to provide some insights today in the incentive programs for the improvement of energy efficiency in the Netherlands. The Dutch government provides several programs to improve energy efficiency, sustainable energy production, and also promotes to reduce environmental impact. And most programs are focused on improvement on efficiency in buildings, and some are applicable for process efficiency. I have petitioned LEED as an eligible measure for one program to the Dutch Ministry of Economic Affairs in 2013, which is now accepted since January 2014. And a special detail is that this is based on LEED version 4, which was officially published in November 2013. So it was just not only 2 months old, not even 2 months old. Well, I'd like to explain some of these available programs for the Dutch market, and in special the MIA VAMIL program, because that's the program where the building certification is part of. Because of the comparison of LEED to BREEAM was a key to have LEED accepted. This is explained in a bit more detail as a third item on my agenda. So let's kick off with an overview of several programs in the Netherlands. Some programs provide direct financial support, and some are based on tax reduction, and some funds to intend to guarantee successful implementation. I'd like to provide some overview in short detail of most common programs. They are divided into principal methods, direct financial support, and indirect. And those are based on tax benefits. First one is the ISDE program, which is available for private and professional users, such as homeowners and non-profit NGOs, to support the investment in energy efficient equipment, such as photovoltaic system, heat pumps, biomass furnaces, and etc. This is some kind of a refund program. Another program is the SDE Plus, which is an operating grant. Producers receive financial compensation for the amount of renewable energy they generate. This program is available for private and professional users and non-profit NGOs. If they produce renewable energy in a renewable way, which is considered as renewable, as I said. The next one is what they call the top sector energy, and this one is intended to support innovations which connect sustainability and to economic growth. This program is meant for professional institutions and companies which are focused on energy innovation in special. Then there are some energy funds, which are more regional programs. The budgets are available at depending on their geographical location, and those programs are available almost for everyone with any good ideas to save some energy or apply renewable energy. Then there are some indirect programs. First of them is the Energy Investment Allowance. This one is intended to support companies in the investment of energy investment technologies in durable or sustainable energy under favorable fiscal conditions. You can deduct 55.5% of the investment cost from the fiscal profits. So on top of your usual depreciation, well, that's a more specific tax regulation, but as a result, you pay less income tax or company tax. On average, the EIA gives you a 30.5 tax advantage based on the total project cost. This is, of course, besides a lower energy bill. Then the second program is a combined one. It's the MIA and VAMIL, V-A-M-I-L. It's the MIA stands for Environmental Investment Rebate, and the VAMIL is based on the name Arbitrary Depreciation of Environmental Investments, which are two different schemes, though they might be able to combine. Using the MIA VAMIL scheme, you can invest in environmental friendly technologies with fiscal advantages, and you can bring innovative environmental friendly products onto the market more quickly because you promote some technologies. Through the MIA, you can deduct up to 36% of the investment cost for an environmental friendly investment from the fiscal profit on the regular depreciation. The VAMIL program allows companies to decide the number of years to apply this deduction, foremost applied when the net profit from the company itself is expected to be higher in the next few years. So although Dutch entrepreneurs who pay income or company tax can make use of these programs, and the programs are interesting for several sectors and in specific sustainable buildings. The MIA VAMIL program also considers green building certification as a measure, and therefore I will explain a bit more about this program. This program is intended to enhance market acceptation of new technologies by allowing more depreciation from the fiscal profit concerning partial or complete project cost. Building certification is now categorized as Code D and Code E. I will come back on that one later. Just remember D and E, which means that it's considered as a MIA only measure. To give an example of the MIA application, it's a bunch of numbers on the screen right now, but in the regular situation, when a company has a net profit of 75,000, in some categories they need to pay 20% tax on the net profit, which is 15,000. With the MIA program, when a company has done an investment of 25,000 euro, and category D is applied, which means it's LEED Platinum, for example, then the amount to be deducted is 67,500, which results in an adjusted profit before tax of 7,500, which means that if 20% tax needs to be paid regarding the adjusted profit, the amount of tax will be 1,500, which results in a benefit of 13,500 euros, which represents more than 5% of the total investment cost. Well, that's some interesting. This is just a small example. It could be a far higher amount when it's applied to new construction of buildings, because the amounts of investments are a bit higher. Well, that's about the example. When it comes to building certification, the Dutch Ministry of Economic Affairs stipulated the following fields of attention. That's it's always an addition of the building code, and it pays some attention to the site assessment, energy efficiency, material use, and in specific the use of wood, which should be certified wood. This is quite similar to what Joan has explained. There are some additional fields of attention on top of the existing codes, or on top of the LEED certification program. it's important to know that you always need a positive fiscal profit, otherwise there's nothing to deduct. And the proposal of the budget to be deducted must be submitted in a well-timed moment before contracting or resale of the building. And therefore you need good planning, a good design team composition, and rigid targets. This program can be used in addition to the other programs, so stacking is possible. If you generate energy, you can also get some benefits of the renewable energy production programs. It was the MIA farm regulation which already accepted certified green buildings, and one of them is BREEAM NL, the Dutch version of BREEAM, the most applied green buildership certification scheme in the Netherlands. Well, this is very acceptable for Dutch companies, but not very practical for multinational companies who often have global policies based on LEED. Furthermore, the application of LEED in Europe is increasing, and this process won't stop at the Dutch border, I think. So to prevent these companies from deviation from their global policies at local level, and also to improve the brand awareness of LEED in the Netherlands, I suggested the Ministry of Economic Affairs to consider LEED as an equivalent measure. And I'd like to explain in brief details how this process of acceptance went. The BREEAM NL credits are categorized in several fields of attention, which is displayed in this diagram. The main focus is based on materials, energies, and surrounding impact, and a bit lower focused on comfort, functionality, and water efficiency. The prerequisites in LEED are displayed in blue circle parts and illustrate the focus on design and construction process itself, and also more on the surrounding environment. And the red line illustrates a field of attention within the LEED credits, where the certification level is determined on. This demonstrates a certain deviation of the systems, but also a certain overlap. And I discussed this overlap with the Dutch government. Because of the overlap of these rating systems is also in line with the fields of importance of the government, so there was no reason to reject LEED as an equivalent system. In fact, I personally think that LEED is more effective and aiming larger impact, but this is a personal opinion. LEED certification is now accepted in two levels. We have a gold and platinum level. Gold projects may apply category E, which represents 13.5 deduction. A minimum level of energy efficiency is required by 7 points, and a selection of material credits must be made and awarded with 4 points. To make the most use of the tax program, platinum projects may apply code D, which allows a deduction of 27%. This requires a minimum of 2 points regarding sustainable sites categories and a minimum of 10 points regarding energy efficiency. And also the same criteria as listed by gold certification before. Please note that a maximum period of 3 years is set as a time limit between submittal for acceptance and certification achievement. So there is a time slot. Well, to wrap up this explanation, LEED building certification is eligible for tax benefits when they earn gold or platinum level. Only companies with company tax obligations in the Netherlands can use this program, and a profit must be made to be able to deduct. Dutch departments or multinationals registered as a Dutch entity are a good solution to this, so there are workarounds to think of. And I think a well-thought project planning and a financial prognosis is beneficial to match the project budget and tax benefit reservations. Also, the targets need to be addressed and maintained throughout the complete project to keep your targets in line with the tax aim. Reselling of the building is possible, but under certain conditions. It might result in a payback of tax benefits when a building is sold in between a certain amount of time. Well, at last, the energy efficiency is well, I hope Energy efficiency is incentivized in the Netherlands in multiple situations. Some provide direct financial support and some are focused on tax benefits. Building certification is also considered as an environmental measure. And because of my efforts, LEED certification is now also accepted when they earn gold or platinum certification. And the incentive programs are reviewed each year, so this presentation might be different in the next upcoming year. So for this moment, I hope this presentation can be of any use for you, and I'd like to thank you for your attention. So I will now hand over the presentation to Ulises.
Hi, Ulises. Can you unmute yourself, please?
Sorry, that's right. Here we are. Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. My name is Ulises Treviño, and speaking on behalf of Bioconstruccion y Energia Alternativa. We are a consulting firm in Mexico, and we were very pleased and honored to participate as advisors for the creation of the new urban development plan of Monterrey, Monterrey City. Just to give you an idea, Monterrey City is the third largest urban area in the country. The metropolitan area is composed out of 12 municipalities, encompassing around 800 square kilometers. There's about 5 million inhabitants we're living in the area. And as such, Monterrey is also the economic and industrial capital of northern Mexico. So there are quite a few challenges associated, of course, with urban development for the town. And for that instance, is that the local authorities have created and updated a urban plan for the years 2013 to 2055. And there are some important green building incentives included that I will describe now in detail. I think one important thing to mention also is that this plan has been developed in quite a different manner from previous ones, saying that this is citizen driven. And this is the important part because the community has really been engaged, involved in the creation of the contents of this plan, which is not a usual thing. So that's one thing that sets apart this plan, and especially also the focus on environmental protection. And there are very, very special considerations that are changing, of course, the zoning ordinance and the permission processes for new projects according to this plan. But it is important to mention that this is a plan devised for the whole metropolitan area. But as I mentioned earlier, there are 12 municipalities included. So the rhythm of acceptance of the technical issues and recommendations within this plan are being accepted at different rhythms, in different paces. So I'll get back to you with those details when we mention about the incentives for green buildings. One other important consideration is about the main objective. As such, this 800 square kilometer city, which grew pretty much at a rate that increased in double in the last 18 years, needed to put a halt to urban sprawl. And that's precisely one of the biggest objectives, saying that it wants to promote mixed use and vertical construction. Of course, the intention is to regain all the infrastructure, intervene areas within the city area, with the objective of creating new community or public projects. So there's a good deal of intention in reusing the existing infrastructure or land for potential regeneration. And one important other element of this plan is about giving a privilege to sustainable transport and mobility. And here I should mention that it's not really an incentive, but it's a new zoning ordinance that, for instance, buildings that are within 500 meters on each side of one main public transport line, for instance, metro or rapid bus transit, there are some density bonus in the terms that you can facilitate also mixed use with higher building heights, for instance. So that becomes a very interesting incentive for developers. And of course, the intention is for those inhabitants, those citizens that live within that area to use public transport as much as they can. So this would be three main elements considered in this urban development plan. So now we go into the applicable or specific incentives for greener buildings, and I'm quoting here certified or third-party assessed green buildings. Of course, LEED is most recognized. It's the one tool that is most accepted and used in the metropolitan area of Monterrey. Just to mention, for instance, Monterrey hosted the first LEED Platinum new construction building and the first LEED EBOM existing building certification in Latin America. That was precisely our office buildings in Monterrey, the ones that achieved this certification. But there are many industrial, commercial buildings, iconic buildings that are doing an extra effort to increase their energy performance and reduce their environmental impact. So as long as the buildings can accredit third-party or formal certification, you'll be entitled to ask for any of these four incentives. Saying the first, exposure and public recognition. The local authorities want to promote these kind of buildings that are the new type of projects they want to see in the urban area. So through their websites, events, public events, they give this special recognition to those developers, those projects that have been achieved higher environmental performance. The second one, which is very attractive, is precisely expedited permits and reduced license costs. The permits, to give you a reference, which are usually within 45 to 60 days, the regular process, if everything is in order, it will be reduced to 15 days. So that's one important incentive. And there are some proportionally discounted rates for the license of construction. Probably the most interesting one also is the property tax rebate. Again, this falls into the realm and discretion of one of each municipalities. So the developer, the property owner, once they have accredited certification, they can claim the opportunity for a rebate of property tax. And the final one is precisely technical support. Out of these municipalities, a few of them are already prepared, giving some advice independently of the internal capacity for the developer. Basically, the government guides the owner on how to properly and most efficiently achieve certification, so they become eligible for all these incentives. I must say that this is in early stages. This plan was devised a couple of years ago, but as I also mentioned, it's up to the municipalities to accept and consider the different details for approval of these general incentives that are now spreading at the state level for some other cities. And these are also in addition to federal incentives that apply to greener buildings, for instance, those related to photovoltaics on site for development and projects overall. So this is the experience from Mexico, from the city of Monterrey. It's a work in progress, but the most important thing that we're learning is about the awareness. People are becoming much more aware about the benefits and the potentials from higher performing buildings. And the word is spreading between investors, between landowners, property developers, and that's becoming very, very relevant. So these incentives we expect to be even more relevant in the near future. This is my presentation for now. So thank you very much for the invitation. It's been a pleasure, and I'm handing over now to Linda all the way to Toronto. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much from Mexico. Good morning, everyone. It's Linda Weichel with Civic Action in Toronto, Canada. And I'm going to take a bit of a different tack to talk about what can be done outside of government to encourage the private sector to both maintain existing buildings and build new. So I'm going to tell you about the Civic Action Race to Reduce, which was a multiple award-winning voluntary smart energy office challenge that Civic Action created and led from 2011 to 2014. Civic Action is a not-for-profit organization that tackles different issues, economic, social, and environmental, facing the Greater Toronto and Hamilton area, which is Canada's largest urban region. And we do that by tapping into the entrepreneurial spirit of leaders from all sectors, government, private sector, labor, community, academia, to identify what are the issues that we should all be paying attention to, and then coming up with innovative solutions to drive action to improve prosperity for everyone. When we were looking at the state of the environment back in 2008, we identified a number of drivers of our environmental state and performance, and noted the extensive contribution of commercial office buildings to the carbon emissions present in the Toronto area. And we actually measured at the time that the Toronto office building stock accounted for close to 20% of the carbon emissions in the Greater Toronto area. And that was based on the existence of about 1,750 office buildings, which represented 165 million square feet of space. And at that time, these buildings, these existing buildings, accounted for about 37% of the electricity use and 17% of the natural gas. There was a lot of attention at the time focused on new construction And there was a lot of focus on residential homes and what they could be doing to reduce their energy use and thereby carbon emissions and other benefits to the environment. But there wasn't a lot of attention being paid to the office sector, despite the fact that they were contributing a significant amount to the carbon emissions. So we saw this as an opportunity at Civic Action. It was also the case that there were a lot of measures that could be taken in office buildings, but not a lot was being done. And so we brought together what is the Civic Action model of those who have a vested interest in this issue, who need to be present to inform the conversation of what do we do about this situation. And so we brought together the major landlords, the building owners, tenants in the office space, service providers, utilities, and government to figure out how these buildings could work together and reduce energy use. We identified a number of barriers. Landlords and tenants weren't really talking to each other outside of lease negotiations. There was a lack of standardized way to measure the energy use of buildings. And there was a split incentive where if a landlord made the investments and made improvements to increase energy efficiency, often that resulted in a reduction in operating expenses, and thereby the tenant wouldn't have to spend as much. So there was a bit of a barrier there to encourage the landlords to be in making the investments that the tenants would then be reaping. So we got everyone together. We had a number of conversations. We established a voluntary leadership council of about 50 organizations and spent several months just identifying what was going on in the marketplace, what were the barriers, what would it take to get everyone to be working together to reduce energy use in their buildings. And fast forward about 18 months, and we announced the Race to Reduce. This was going to be a 4-year challenge, working with landlords and tenants in the commercial office space, and they publicly committed to work together to reduce their buildings' energy use by a collective 10% over the duration of the race. We decided to use Energy Star's Portfolio Manager as the database to track energy performance, and we threw down the gauntlet to see how these buildings could do. Ultimately, we ended up having close to 200 buildings and hundreds of tenants registered in the Race to Reduce. Those buildings represented just over 69 million square feet of office stock, approximately 42% of the region's space. And we were happy to announce, thrilled to announce at the end of the 4 years that they surpassed their 10% collective goal and reduced their collective energy use by 12.1%. More importantly, this changed the way landlords and tenants work together on a systemic basis and embedded new expectations and norms into the marketplace for sustained change. So I wanted to share what it took to get there. How did we accomplish this? And I'll share 5 key elements that make the Race to Reduce unique and that contributed greatly to its success. Starting with collaboration. We provided a platform that really encouraged energy reduction activities between landlords and tenants. To our knowledge, this is the first of its kind energy reduction program that is based on landlord-tenant collaboration. And we really needed the tenants to be part of this because it was, given that tenants can control up to 50% of a building's energy use, they had to be in there and have a stake in the game. In fact, much of the early push came from the tenants. They were very focused on their own environmental performance, which was important to their clients, their employees, and they, in fact, did some of the early calls to their landlords to say, we need to figure this out together. The second point was establishing a collective target. So with Civic Action's model, we always have a target to aim for. It really boosts momentum and motivation. But we recognized through all of our consultation that buildings are at different stages, at different ages, with different investments made over time, and it was difficult to get every building to commit to the same goal. So what instead we did was agree that we would have a collective goal that everybody would work towards contributing to, that would reflect where buildings were at, that some had already made great strides and would have less perhaps to do, and others had a longer way to go. This was the way to bring everyone to the table and sign up and commit to work towards this collective goal. The next clear sign of success or measure of success was that we weren't prescriptive. And again, we learned this through our conversations. We initially had come up with a bit of a checklist of the actions and the investments that the participants could make. But no, it was better to be providing the principles, again, the platform, but leave the landlords and tenants on a building by building basis to figure out what they could do together can everyone hear me okay?
Yes, absolutely, Linda.
Okay, thank you. I just got a flash on my screen. So that everyone could figure out together what they could do in their own building. Some set building targets, others simply identified the actions that they could take together and carried on with it. The fourth point was that although we weren't prescriptive in telling them exactly what they should do, we certainly provided them with a host of resources to support their energy reduction efforts, such as case studies, toolkits, certainly the business case for making these investments, and access to utility representatives. And that was a very big part of it. We worked with the electricity and gas utilities who saw that this aligned well with their demand management and save on energy programs, and were very collaborative in reaching out and actually proactively offering their services and their incentive programs to our participants. And fifth, we had awards. And again, this is a key part of the civic action model generally in whatever we do. But we understand that people are highly motivated to be celebrated as leaders. It taps into the competitive spirit of the commercial office sector. And this annual awards event was really an opportunity to shine a spotlight on the efforts of participating landlords and tenants, their activities, and their impact. It helped to continuously reset the benchmarks for the industry to aspire to, and really showed what's possible and celebrated that achievement. I remember the first year when we announced the energy reduction scores and the degree to which a building could reduce its energy and continue to perform and keep everyone happy. And there was a collective gasp in the room as to the fact that this could be accomplished. This is an example, a couple of examples of our various awards events over the course of the race with our chair and CEO and many of the award winners. But it really turned into an event that everyone looked forward to and enjoyed the fetting and the celebration, and again showing what's possible, stoking that competitive spirit for the contenders to be working towards. So to wrap up, in terms of the keys that made this voluntary initiative so successful, number one, bring the right people to the table and secure their support early on. We had to have the people who had the power and influence to give the authority for buildings to participate in this, to align their time and resources to make this happen. So again, we had created our leadership council of senior executives who were key decision makers in their organizations. Secondly, leverage the power and influence of that group. They became internal champions of the program within their organization and ambassadors of the program within their own networks, and we were able to bring more people into the tent and the program as a result. Thirdly, engagement at the building level is just as important as at the executive level. It's one thing to get the buy-in of the senior executives, but we really needed to dig deep and make sure that the communication and the resources were being available to the building manager level to make sure things were actually going to be happening on the ground. And fourthly, we wanted to make sure and did develop an ongoing engagement strategy that involves direct communication at the building level. People are busy, they've got lots of different priorities. We needed to create a sustained presence and a profile. And again, this annual awards event was a way to anchor their attention and get people to focus on what they needed to do by the time that data was required to be submitted and then ultimately celebrated. This is a great example. Two tenant representatives from Steichman Law Firm in Toronto with the representative from Great West Life Realty Advisors at the time, holding the race baton. And this really captures the essence of the key to the race to reduce. It really changed the expectations and the behaviors by both landlords and tenants and transformed business as usual. We were pleased that we put out a survey to the participants along the way, and more than a majority indicated that the race was responsible for actions or collaborations that otherwise would not have happened. Finally, again, civic action does not do anything in isolation, and what we do is aim to incubate and demonstrate actions that can be taken that are ultimately embedded and sustained over time. We also recognize that in the space of the usual length of a project, we may not get all of our work done, but that others could carry on, which we could then free up our time to focus on new issues. So we're pleased that there is a fantastic legacy to the race. In Manitoba, which is another province in Canada, they have just launched a race to reduce in Winnipeg, in the city of Winnipeg, by the utility Manitoba Hydro in January of this year. BOMA, the Building Owners and Managers Association of Toronto, is launching a Race 2.0 this June for landlords. And again, I understand they'll be continuing to engage the large Class A office buildings, but also zeroing in on the smaller Class B buildings to get more of them focused and engaged in this process. We were fortunate to be recognized for our efforts and our impact locally, nationally, and internationally. And I will also say that we served to smooth the way to an Ontario benchmarking mandatory reporting regulation that is now coming into effect for large private sector buildings to report water and energy on an annual basis. And that really was much less of a traumatic event and more of a smooth, collaborative experience to figure it out, the government and the industry, because of the work that we and others had done in establishing that precedent and that behavior of annually reporting and figuring out the systems and processes that needed to be done to facilitate that. We're also thrilled that a number of the national landlords that we worked with ultimately embedded the target into their portfolios and established a 10% reduction target year over year over the course of the race for their entire portfolio across Canada. So that is the end of my presentation. I'm thrilled to share it with you and demonstrate what can happen on a voluntary basis that is informed by, created by, and driven by the industry itself. And now I will turn it back to Grant from the the U.S. Green Building Council. Grant.
Thank you very much, Linda. And thank you to all of our speakers, and especially thank you to the audience. I realize that we have run over here, but if a few of you don't mind sticking around, we do have some polls that we'd like to ask you in order to gather more information about how the Building Efficiency Accelerator can support the work of its member cities and jurisdictions around the world. For the first poll, we'd like to ask, what policy options do you think warrant consideration in your city? Leadership by example, which is greening government-owned buildings, that in turn trains the workforce and has spillover effects where green buildings become more common in the private sector. Financial incentives for above-code construction or private sector development. Density bonus or structural incentive for above-code development. Above-code requirements for new buildings of a certain size or type. So we'll give you guys 30 seconds, and please choose which policy options you think warrant consideration. Thank you. I'm realizing that this is a short poll and we're already running a little bit over, so I guess we can stop now in ours. If you don't mind sharing the results, thank you very much. I see you're doing that. So that's great. That gives us some good info to work with. And now let's move on to poll 2, which is please identify the most important aspects of your city or your city's interests in above code construction. Save money for government, residents, and businesses. Save energy, save water, meet city/country climate goals, or reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So please choose 3 of those. Okay, so 20 seconds has gone by now. Ours, please. Thank you. Okay, moving on to poll number 3. What additional information would be most useful in your market/jurisdiction? Country-specific talking points/statistics, draft/example policies, case studies from cities, research illustrating benefits of above code construction, tactical training, which is was described by Ulises, how to get business and stakeholder support. So we'll go ahead and give you another 20 seconds on that, and then we'll try to get to some of the questions here quickly. I guess we can just extend it to 10:30 if folks don't mind. I realize I probably should have scheduled for 90 minutes as is, but okay, let's go ahead and share those results, Aris. Cool. Well, thank you for everybody for participating in those. Those will be shared with all BEA partners and give us some helpful information. I'm now going to give it back to Aris so we can get the Q&A started.
Thank you, Grant. We have a few questions from the audience. The first one is for Joan, and the question is, what accounted for the bump in not certified buildings in 2014 and 2015 in Arlington? That's it. Joan, the question is for you.
Yes, I'm here. Yes, 2014 and 2015, the bump.
Yeah, the question is, yeah.
I think that's just the vagaries of the development cycle. One of the things that we think contributed to that is that we increased our lead incentive to go to LEED version 4 right around that time, and a lot of buildings, we think, not a lot, several buildings came in before the deadline so they could use the old LEED version 2009. That was, you know, I guess that means people are paying attention, and we're a little bit afraid of the LEED version 4 requirements, so they still wanted to use the program, but they needed to get in before the deadline. So that was probably part of what pushed those numbers a little bit higher.
Thank you very much for your response. The next question is for Gerrit-Jan, and it's a question regarding if policy can be implemented to Brazil. The question is there any technical cooperation program to help countries to develop legislation and knowledge on the subject?
Well, that's a good question. I think the Netherlands have some cooperation programs available, but these are not included in the programs I presented. But I can get to that point in a later stage if you can give me more details about the question and the person who asked the question. Is that an option?
Yes, of course. But, yeah.
And Aris, let me jump in to add. We'll absolutely follow up with more information. This is Grant with USGBC.
Okay, thank you very much. The next question is again for you, Gerrit, and the question is, how is the investor-user dilemma for energy efficiency investment in the housing sector addressed in the Netherlands?
I need to get the answer of the question straight. So could you repeat it for me, please?
Yes, of course. The question is, how is the investor-user dilemma for energy efficiency investment in the housing sector addressed in the Netherlands?
The investor-user what? I'm afraid I didn't understand it right.
It's the dilemma. It's how you face and how you deal with potentially energy efficiency investment in the housing sector, and how you address any problems and questions to the investors and users.
Yes, the housing corporations are considered as non-profit NGOs, and that's where sometimes the problems are, but those groups also have a commercial entity, and they can also make use of the programs I presented, just like the EIA and the MIA program. So they are also included and eligible to make use of these programs.
Thank you very much. The next question, I think, is, I'm not sure if it's for Ulises or Gerrit. I think it's for Ulises. How do you see the relationships of energy conservation, energy efficiency, and comfort?
Yes. Well, it's indeed a very close relationship. We've been having, I wouldn't say local, but national technical discussions about it, because in our climate, say Mexico, or could be applicable, of course, for similar countries with climate such as ours. We are into this dilemma of how much we should sacrifice comfort in terms of against energy efficiency. But the result so far, and that's also what we have been including in our codes and regulations, is that comfort shouldn't be compromised or sacrificed for energy efficiency, as long as the right passive measures and the right technologies and materials are being used in place. So in short, our building and construction codes are pushing for energy efficiency, but without sacrificing comfort and indoor environmental quality.
Thank you very much. The next question is, please.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, maybe I can add something to that one from Ulises, because the building code is obliged and or is mandatory, and energy conservation measures sometimes have a bigger impact and also might affect the comfort. But I think that's a challenge for every design team to find the best solution and find the best comfort achievable with a minimum on energy consumption. That's the challenge.
Thank you very much. The next question is about Linda. It's for Linda, and it's about the split incentive. And the question is, did the energy efficiency improvement / programs affect the rent prices?
Thank you for the question. I cannot speak to any specific data about this. I know anecdotally, I had heard that tenants' monthly operating charges were reduced thanks to the energy savings. Ultimately, it's possible that the landlords were able to charge more for rent given the value inherent in more energy efficient spaces. But those are a couple of market dynamics that could inform the answer, but I don't have a solid data foundation to answer that. I think what was the important point, though, is that there was a much greater level of trust and awareness and understanding of everyone's role that led to, in fact, a much more sustained relationship. And I think it would be interesting to look at the retention rate of tenants in existing buildings to see the effect of those improved relationships over time.
Thank you, Linda. The next question is for everyone, and it's about having a competition to spur energy efficiency designs. And the question is, how can people get access to this information and use it to guide their designs?
I think this is Grant with the U.S. Green Building Council. I think there's a lot of information that's existing and out there, and as a part of the BEA, we've gathered a lot of information, and we have it hosted on a library. So I'll be sure to get the contact information for the person who asked that question and do a direct follow-up. But we're right up at 10:30 now, and I know people have things that they have to get to. So if we didn't get into it to all of your questions, I'm deeply sorry, but we will follow up, or I will follow up directly with you in the near future. So I think with that, we are going to cut it off. Aris, thank you for your help. Speakers, thank you very much. Audience, thank you very much. And I hope everybody has a good rest of their day.